The big picture concepts of creating propulsion are simple. Swimmers have to move a lot of water backwards, and to do so, they have to create as big a surface area as possible. They have to move that surface area backwards for as long as possible, and they have to accelerate the limb throughout. If swimmers can execute those skills, they're going to create a lot of propulsion, and they're going to go fast. However, no matter how important the big picture is, there are relevant details as well, and that's what we're going to check out now. Specifically, we're going to discuss the role of lateral motion of the hands. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. While swimmers definitely need to move water backwards in order to go forwards, you'll notice that swimmers don't pull directly backwards. There's definitely some side-to-side motion throughout the stroke once the hand enters the water. The question is, why is that the case, and whether swimmers should emphasize it in order to create more propulsion? Let's check it out. In general, after entry, the hands are going to move out a little bit, they're going to move in a little bit, and then they're going to move back out a little bit. The question is, why is that the case? Are swimmers trying to create certain forces, or are they simply trying to reposition the arm in order to be most effective in order to create propulsion backwards so they can move forwards? I think it's the latter, and we're going to take a look at why I think that's the case. So if we watch here, what she's going to do, she's going to enter with that hand straight in front, and then in order to get the arm positioned so that the hand is down, the elbow is up, and the forearm is facing backwards, she necessarily is going to have to slide the elbow and therefore the hand out to the side. And so that's what we see. We see that really great hook position, that really great catch position. You can't do that with a straight arm. The only way that's going to happen is if the elbow moves out to the side and the hand is going to get dragged along for the ride. And so that's why you see a little bit of lateral motion out to the side in the front of the stroke. And as a quick detour, if you notice most freestylers, like you see here, enter pretty much straight in front of the shoulder. In breaststroke, the hands are going to enter actually in front of the face upon the recovery. And so swimmers still have to get those arms out wide to get the elbows out wide, but they're starting in a much more narrow position. And so that's why you see a lot more lateral motion in the front of breaststroke, because they're starting in a much more narrow position. We'll take a look at that a little bit later, but I wanted to plant that seed here. So she sets up the stroke, she gets out wide, and then we'll watch the hand comes into the body right there. And so why does that happen? Well, remember, that elbow is out to the side. And in order to pull the arm backwards, the muscles of the chest, the muscles of the back are going to contract. And the way they contract is they pull the elbow into the side. And so as a result, if the elbow comes in, well, the hand's attached to the elbow. So in comes the elbow, boom, in comes the hand. And so it's not, again, the hands aren't necessarily trying to scull or anything like that. They're just following the path of the elbow. And the elbow needs to come into the body because that's where the strongest muscles contract. That pulls the arm backwards, and that moves the swimmer forward. So again, this inward motion isn't a scull. It's the contraction of the strongest muscles, pulling the arm back and in, and so the hand moves back and in. You can't really pull back. You can't contract those muscles while keeping the elbow out. It has to come into the body, and so the hand gets dragged along as well. Now, once the elbow gets pulled in, the hand gets pulled in, the hand's going to be relatively under the body. But the swimmer can't recover the arm from under the body, so they have to transition the hand back out so that she can smoothly and effortlessly recover the arm. And so once this pull finishes, the elbow comes close to the body, the hand has to necessarily transition out in order to recover the arm effectively. Now, at this point, there's not very much propulsion getting created, so you can see she's pulling, and then right here, she just kind of lets go of it, sliding out to the side so that she can recover the arm forward. If she tried to pull all the way back here, completely straight, kept the hand under the body, and then tried to recover the arm, it would take a whole lot more effort. It would be a lot slower. It would take a lot more time, and she's not going to get really much propulsion out of it anyway. So she's going to bail on that, and again, she's got to let the hand slide out. So a lot of these lateral motions are consequences of what needs to happen in order to pull back. They're not necessarily propulsive motions in and of themselves. So again, she's setting up in the front, sliding out in order to get the hand in position, to get the arm facing down, and then coming back in when she contracts the strongest muscles of the upper body, and then transitioning out in order to recover effectively. Again, these lateral motions are supportive elements that help her move water backwards so she can move forward. So we'll take a look at the same skills here, the same concept applied to butterfly. So you can see we're starting off, he's entering right about shoulder width, and then he's going to slide out so his elbows can get out, and that's going to bring the hands with him. And then as he pulls, elbows come in, hands come in, and then at the finish, they've got to slide back out again so he can recover. And that all happens for the same reasons as in freestyle. The only difference is they're happening at the same time as opposed to separate. So shoulder width, everything slides out. Right here, he's setting up the catch. And so as you can see, the elbow pops out to the side. That's getting him in this position right here with both arms. The hands slide out because they're a slave to the elbow. And then he's pulling. Watch the elbows come in come the hands. And then once they're under the body, again, just like the freestyler, he's got to transition them out in order to get the arms over the water. So same basic concepts, same principles, different stroke, slightly different application. And what you'll see here with this swimmer, there is a little bit more of a lateral motion with the hands, a little bit more exaggerated than the elbow motion. That is likely actually he's going to let go of a little bit of water in order to maintain the hand speed that he needs. It's a lot harder to maintain hand speed in butterfly so that he can create the hand speed necessary to recover the arms fast and effortlessly. So again, same principles. Elbows slide out to set up the stroke, the hands follow. Elbows are squeezed into the body there, the hands follow. And then rather than getting the hands stuck under his body, they're going to slide out so he can recover smoothly. So a lot of lateral motions here. However, it's all happening to set up the stroke, to put the hands and arms in a position to create propulsion. And then the pull itself is going to bring those arms back into the body, but then he's got to transition back in order to recover the arms smoothly. So lateral motions are serving the goal of creating as much forward propulsion as possible by moving the arms backwards while moving as much water as possible. So as we addressed briefly earlier, the hands are going to start from a really narrow position in breaststroke. They have to slide out so that the elbows can come out. And as you watch here, the elbows are driving out. They're starting to bend. And now he's in that same position, that same hook position he needs to be in to move water. And then he's going to pull back. The difference between breaststroke and the other strokes is that rather than transitioning at the end of the stroke to get the hands out by the side, by the hips, breaststrokers have to recover the arms under the water. So during the pull, they need to pull the arms in a little bit more so that they can get the hands forward quickly, because if they just pulled straight back, the hands would end up at the hips. So they have to round the pull more in order to get the hands forward. So there's a lot more lateral motion in breaststroke, but again, it's not just to create more propulsion by sculling. It's because of the challenges unique to breaststroke. The hands are recovering together, and so it takes more time. There's more lateral motion to get into an effective pulling position, and then they can't just pull straight back. They have to pull in so that the hands stay in front of the body. They don't get trapped behind so that they can recover the hands smoothly. They can still get a ton of propulsion here, but they don't suffer the penalty of pulling back and then having to recover forward if they just round off the pull. So doing so is the smoothest way to recover quickly while still getting as much as possible out of the pull. The same dynamics are going to be happening here at backstroke. She's going to enter straight over the top in order to maintain her alignment, but if she pulls from that position, she's not going to do anything. The hand's pretty much at the surface. There's no surface area to pull with, so she won't go anywhere or do anything. So she's got to get the arm out to the side in order to get in a position where she can get the arm facing backwards. So if you see here, now her hand is way out to the side. She's not sculling, she's repositioning the arm, so you can see the forearm, the whole arm is facing backwards, and then she's going to pull, and then that elbow's out to the side. Remember we talked about in the other strokes, it's got to come into the body to power the pull. That's what happens there, and as a result, the hand gets pulled into the body. From that position, she can just go straight up over the top and recover the arm. So again, a lot of lateral motion. If you just follow the hand path, you'd think she's doing all sorts of sculling, but she's basically entering right there, getting the hand wide to set up the stroke, pulling straight back, and by pulling, that elbow is going to come into the body. The hand comes into the body as well. She finishes the stroke, and then she just recovers. So again, lots of lateral motion, and by setting up the pull, they have to create a big surface area to move water with, and to execute the pull, they have to use the strongest muscles. In backstroke, that means getting the arm out wide to get a great surface area, and that means pulling the elbow back into the body to use the strongest muscles of the upper body. Executing a great pull isn't necessarily about creating absolutely as much propulsion as possible. In fact, it's actually about optimizing the amount of propulsion that swimmers can create within the context of the entire stroke. Ironically, if swimmers are focused on creating too much propulsion, they can actually swim slower. we're going to talk about the difference between optimizing propulsion and maximizing propulsion. And typically, where this is seen most often is during the finish of the stroke. A mistake swimmers often make is trying to get every little last bit of propulsion out of each stroke, and that actually ends up ruining the rest of their stroke, and they go slower as a result. So we'll take a look at what that looks like and the consequences of trying to get too much propulsion out of each stroke so that you can help your swimmers better understand what they need to do in order to swim as fast as possible. Now, if a swimmer wanted to go as fast as possible, it would make sense that they would try to pull back as far as possible, right? Let's check out what this Olympic champion is going to choose to do. Now, if we watch the back of the stroke, if he wants to get as much propulsion as possible, he should finish with the arm relatively straight. If we watch, though, what he's going to do is his elbow stays bent, and he pretty much just picks it up at that point. So why is that the case? So if he got to here and he continued to push back, he could probably get more propulsion with each stroke. And watch the same thing on the other side. You can see the elbow stays bent, and then he just kind of pulls it out. And if we watch the other side, we can see the same thing happen. The elbow's bent there, and he just kind of pulls it out. So why is he doing that? Well, if he pulled back and extended the elbow all the way here, he could probably get some more propulsion. However, then his arm is going to completely come to a stop. It's going to be much more difficult to recover the arm over the water, and that's going to really slow him down. His stroke rate's going to be a lot slower, and it's going to take a whole lot more energy to do that. So instead of maximizing the amount of propulsion he's going to create, he's going to try to optimize it. And if we watch here, when he pulls right there, he's got his elbow squeezed to the body by that point. He's going to have used the strongest muscles of the upper body, the pecs and the lats. And so at this point, he's going to have less and less surface area facing backwards, and he's going to have to extend the arm with the triceps alone. So it's not going to be particularly effective. He can get a little bit more propulsion, but most of it's coming from here to there, and then he's just going to be able to get a little bit more if he tries to finish the stroke completely. And so he's going to have to use a smaller surface area to make that happen. He's going to have to use smaller muscles to make that happen, and he's going to lose all his hand speed. So what he might gain is going to be relatively small, but what he's going to lose is going to be huge because he's not going to have the hand speed. He's going to have to pick his arm up out of the water, and it's going to take a lot more time to get back into the next stroke. So again, it's about optimization, not maximization, because if he tries to maximize propulsion, he'll actually go slower because of the impact on the recovery. Now, this isn't just a distance swimming thing. So if we watch here, you can see elbows bent coming up out of the water. Elbows bent there, and he's not extending it all the way back. Elbows bent, and then he's recovering from there. And so he's not going to extend fully at the back of the stroke. He's going to keep the elbow somewhat bent, and then he's going to recover from that position. And that's going to help him, especially in a sprint. He needs to recover the arms fast. And because they're recovering with such effort, he needs to use as much of the momentum of the arm to get the arm over the water and to get the arm over the water fast rather than pulling it over the water. So again, not finishing the stroke there. He's still getting a ton of propulsion out of it because he squeezed his arm to the body. Now he's going to lose the surface area, and he's going to have to extend with the tricep and the back of the arm. Again, small surface area, small muscles. It's not going to create a lot of propulsion, so he's not missing out on that much, but he's going to do it in a way that allows him to recover so much faster and so much better. So again, optimization rather than maximization. Because it's a principle, it doesn't just necessarily apply to freestyle. Same thing happens here in butterfly. Elbows are bent, and she's recovering them, and they only extend straight once she recovers them over the water. And it's probably even more true in butterfly because if she extends her arms here underwater, then she's going to have to whip both those arms out of the water with no momentum at the same time and try to recover the arms. If you swim butterfly, you know it can be challenging enough to get the arm recoveries at high speeds and hold those throughout. And so she's doing everything she can to get as much help through those recoveries as possible. Could she get a little bit more propulsion out of it? Yeah, probably. She can extend the arms back a little bit further, but just like with freestyle, the elbows are already squeezed into the body. She's already done the work with her pecs and her lats. All that's left is the triceps, and she doesn't have much surface area to work with left. So if she were to finish the stroke, she'd get a little bit more propulsion, but she'd be giving up so much, she's choosing to keep the elbows bent through the finish, not fully finishing the stroke so that she can recover the arms more effectively. And so again, Just as with freestyle, it's about optimizing the amount of propulsion that's created rather than maximizing the amount of propulsion that's created in the back of a stroke. And just like with butterfly, the same thing's going to happen with breaststroke, but probably even more extreme because of the underwater recoveries of the arms. And so she's going to basically squeeze the arms into the body here versus just totally back. So if she wanted to, she could pull back further than that, get the hands down closer to her hips. But if she does that, she's got to bring those hands all the way back up the body. That's going to, one, take forever. Two, it's going to slow her down so much because of the drag that she creates, and it's going to make it that much longer before she can create propulsion with the legs and with the arms again. And so it's absolutely critical to optimize the breaststroke pull rather than maximize it. If swimmers try to pull back absolutely as far as they can, it's going to make it so much more difficult to recover the arms, and they're not going to get that much more propulsion. And so she's already pulling back pretty far. So she's pulling back right there, and then she's squeezing in. If she tried to keep pulling back, she's not going to get that much more. She's going to lose the surface area that she needs, and she's kind of run out of muscle to contract. They've already pulled the arms to the side. She can't really pull them back further. And so she'd get a little bit more propulsion, but she'd give up so much in terms of recovering the arms under the water and having to do so over a longer distance. So again, it's not about maximizing the propulsion in each pull. It's about optimizing it. And of course, the more propulsion swimmers can create, the faster they're going to go. But that comes more from setting up the stroke more effectively, executing the main part of the pull more effectively, not just extending the duration of the pull. And so the more that swimmers can learn how to time everything correctly to transition smoothly between different components of the stroke, the faster they're going to swim. And rather than maximizing propulsion, it's all about optimizing propulsion. When you look at elite swimmers, you rarely see the same traditional high elbow pull that you might see in really effective middle distance or distance swimmers. Are these sprinters missing out on a skill that could otherwise help them swim faster? Or have they figured out a strategy that allows them to create as much speed as possible? We're talking about the high elbow pull in sprint freestyle, and while the principles remain the same, the specific application is going to be a little bit different based upon the demands of the event. There aren't a lot of 50-meter sprinters that are using an early vertical forearm. Why is that the case? Let's check it out. So to establish some context, let's take a look at an early vertical forearm in a distance swimmer. And so he's getting the forearm straight up and down really early in the stroke. He's got a really high elbow, and he's going to hold that position throughout the whole stroke. So his arm is in front of his head, and he's already in that high elbow position, and then he's going to hold it all the way through. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about an early vertical forearm. In contrast, when we watch a sprint, he's not getting the forearm quite as vertical until maybe about right there. And so that's a pretty big difference in terms of what he's doing. Now, is that a mistake? Why is that different? If you notice, he still is in a really effective position. His hand is deeper than his elbow, and his elbow is going to be a little bit out to the side. So he's still getting a pretty good surface area facing backwards. The key difference is it's taking him longer to get into a completely vertical position as compared to the previous swimmer who was getting his arm vertical way out in this position. Why is that the case? Well, they have different time demands. This sprinter is using a much higher stroke rate, so he doesn't necessarily have time to set up the stroke that patiently. And so, yes, he may give up a slight amount of propulsion, but he's actually going to be able to go so much faster because he can get into creating propulsion right away. So instead of waiting, he's already creating propulsion right there, and he doesn't have to wait to set up the stroke. And just as importantly, because of the timing, he's immediately creating propulsion with the opposite arm when the first arm finishes pulling. And so there's no delay from arm to arm. And so that means he's going to be able to stack propulsive impulses one on top of the other, and then there's no delay between that propulsive impulse, and that means he's going to be able to create a higher speed, and he's going to be able to hold that speed. And so again, this is a little bit of a trade-off. He's going to have to miss a little bit of the front of the stroke, but as a result, he's going to get into those positions that are still really effective, but slightly less effective perhaps, and he's going to be able to do that a lot faster and a lot sooner, and that's going to allow him to swim faster because he can create more of those impulses and he can create them faster. While you may give up a little bit of propulsion per stroke, you're actually getting more propulsion overall because it happens faster and it happens more frequently. So again, it's all about using the basic strategies, the basic principles of what creates speed, and then modifying them to the specific context in order to create the result that we're looking for. In this case, You sacrifice a little bit from the front of the stroke and to get a whole lot more out of the stroke in general, because the timing is going to be more effective and everything is going to happen so much faster. So when trying to be really good at the sprints, it's all about maintaining a really high rate of propulsive impulses and then trying to be as effective as possible within that rate. So he needs to keep the stroke rate up as high as possible, and then within that stroke rate, he's trying to create the best positions he can as fast as possible. And that's one reason why it's really difficult to sprint really fast, is because many swimmers struggle to get in the right positions at high rates. And so even here, when he's swimming at really high rates, that's still a really good position, and he's holding that position all the way through. Again, it's not as early as the other position, but he's doing that with a lot less time, and that's going to allow him to go a whole lot faster. So again, rather than having a perfect pull with perfect positions, it's applying the principles based upon the different contexts and then trying to find the solution that's going to work best for each swimmer. And while this is sprint freestyle, the same basic principles apply in all the other strokes. There may be a slightly less effective setup of the stroke, but if that allows swimmers to create a much higher stroke rate and still get the vast majority of the propulsion out of each stroke, that's going to allow them to swim a lot faster. So they may give up a little bit in the setup of the stroke, but if that allows them to move their arms a whole lot faster, that's going to create more overall speed. When it comes to propulsion, the principles are the same, but the specific strategies that swimmers use can sometimes be different. And this will depend on the event that swimmers are swimming, as well as their physical characteristics. If swimmers are really strong and they're swimming a short race, they will often choose to use a different strategy as compared to a weaker swimmer who is swimming a longer race. And while it can be tempting to try to have all swimmers swim the same way, more often than not, that results in swimmers not achieving their potential. Creating propulsion is all about using a big surface area to move a lot of water over a long range of motion at high speeds. And the better swimmers can execute on all of those skills, the faster they're going to go. Of course, there's different ways to get the job done. And what's traditionally thought of as the most effective way to make that happen is with the high elbow, early vertical forearm pull. And so that's where swimmers set up the stroke really early and then hold those positions for as long as they can. However, with some bigger and stronger athletes swimming over shorter distances, you'll often see that they try to take advantage of the second half of the stroke and create as much propulsion in that portion as possible. As a result, they're not quite as effective with setting up the stroke, but they get a lot deeper and they hold a whole lot more water through the back half of the stroke. Let's check it out. So we'll start here with the traditional high elbow, early vertical forearm pull. And so you can see he's really good there. He's got everything set up early. He's going to hold that position through the back half of the stroke. What I want you to pay attention to is his elbow stays relatively high, relatively close to the surface of the water throughout the whole stroke. So he's not going very deep. He's setting up early, he's holding that position, and he's staying relatively shallow with the pull. Obviously, it's going to be a really effective strategy. It's one that works for a lot of swimmers, but in some cases, there are other options in order to create a ton of propulsion. Now, this swimmer is a 4-time Olympic medalist in the 50 freestyle, and he is on his way towards a world championship in this footage. And as you can see, he's driving down, but he's getting very deep, but that allows him to create a really big surface area from about here all the way through the back of the stroke, and he's going to be able to move a ton of water during the second half of the stroke as opposed to the first half of the stroke. So in comparison to the swimmer we just saw, this swimmer is getting the hands much deeper, and that allows him to be much more effective during the back half of the stroke, although he gives up a little bit in the front, but that allows him to be really good in the back, and it allows him to maintain a higher stroke rate while he's doing that. Of course, the catch is by getting those hands deeper, by holding water in the back of the stroke, he's got to be a lot stronger. He's got to create a lot more force, and it's going to be a lot less sustainable. But he's a really big guy. He's really strong, and he's racing over 50 meters. And so sustainability isn't really a concern at all. So he's using the same principles. He's creating a big surface area. He's holding that for a pretty long range of motion. He's just doing so in a different way at different point in the stroke. He's keeping it deep, and he's being really, really good in the back half of the stroke, moving a ton of water by getting the hand and the arm really deep and then keeping that forearm facing back through the back half of the stroke. So same principles, different strategy because it's a different context. Stronger swimmer, shorter distance, you get a different stroke. Now we can see the same dynamic in butterfly. And so this is a 200 butterflyer, and you can see her elbows are really bent. She's keeping her elbows relatively high to the surface. She's not getting super deep. And so she's got a much more early vertical forearm type stroke. With here, she's setting it up early in the stroke. She's holding that position through the back of the stroke, and she's not getting particularly deep with the stroke. It allows her to move a lot of water. It allows her to set up early in the stroke and move water for a pretty good range of motion. It's just not nearly as deep as we saw like in the freestyler previously. And of course, she's swimming over 200 meters, and she's not quite as strong, so she needs to be able to sustain that. A lower force stroke is going to be a lot more sustainable. It's going to be a lot more efficient, and that means she's going to be able to create a lot of speed, but she's going to be able to hold that throughout the entire 200, which is the key point. So she's still satisfying the same principles. She's just doing so in a way that allows her to be successful. In contrast, we have the 50-meter butterfly, and this is swum by a sprint butterfly specialist who doesn't even swim the 100 butterfly. And so as you can see, he doesn't care about efficiency. He's a lot stronger, and as a result, he's pressing through the front of the stroke, but the back half of the stroke, those hands are deep, and that's allowing him to move a lot of water there and be really powerful in the back half of the stroke. So again, not setting it up nearly as well by traditional standards in the front of the stroke, but that setup allows him to get deep with the arms, to get straighter with the arms, and that allows him to move a ton of water during the back half of the stroke. It is not sustainable. It requires a lot more strength, but in the short term, it can create a lot of speed. And so it's a really effective tool for a certain type of swimmer in a certain type of situation, and that can allow him to create the speed that he needs in order to be successful in his event. You can see right there, he's getting it deep, and he's using a lot of surface area in the back of the stroke to create a lot of speed. Again, we'll see the same dynamic here in breaststroke. So this athlete, she's going to get her elbows up. She's going to get the hands facing backwards and the forearms facing backwards. You can see the elbows are right at the surface of the water. So she has a very shallow pull, which is going to be more sustainable. It's going to require less force, and that's going to allow her to be successful. And this athlete's been successful over 100 and 200 meters, and so she's got to use a strategy that allows her to do that. Keeping the elbows up a little bit higher, the pull a little bit shallower, means she can still create a really great surface area, still get a good range of motion, but it doesn't require quite as much force. And that's going to allow her to create speed, and it's going to allow her to hold that speed throughout the entirety of her races. Same principles, but using a different pull, a little bit shallower pull that doesn't require quite as much force, but that allows her to maintain a high rate, and it allows her to maintain her skills and maintain her pull throughout the entire distance. So if we watch this swimmer, he only has raced over 100 meters, and he's also a lot stronger, and he's going to use a straighter, deeper pull. While he may not be setting up his stroke quite as early, he's getting his hands deeper, his arms deeper, and that's allowing him to create a lot of force during the second half of the pull. And so again, a shorter distance, a stronger swimmer, he's going to use a strategy that allows him to take advantage of the situation and create a ton of propulsion based upon his specific context. A deeper, straighter pull can create a lot of propulsion. It's just not as sustainable, and it requires more force. But if swimmers aren't racing over longer distances and they have the strength, it can be a really effective strategy in order to create speed. So when swimmers are using these strategies, they're not making mistakes. They're taking advantage of opportunities. The position of the arm, the position of the hands, the position of the elbow underwater can seem really complicated. Wouldn't it be nice if it was actually really simple in terms of what swimmers need to do in order to execute an effective pull? Fortunately, it is. We're going to talk about the appropriate positions for effective hand and elbow position to create a ton of propulsion. And fortunately, the principles apply to all the strokes. They just happen in slightly different ways. Once you can understand and see what swimmers have to do, it becomes a lot simpler to help communicate to them how they can create a ton of propulsion in each stroke. So what needs to happen? Basically, the hand needs to be deeper than the elbow, and the elbow needs to be wider than the hand. When that's the case, swimmers tend to create a pretty big surface area to move a whole lot of water with, and it gives them a lot of flexibility to adapt those positions to the different strokes and to their specific anatomy. If they're a little bit stronger, their arms are a little bit longer, their arms are a little bit shorter, they've got a little bit more range of motion, they've got a little bit less range of motion. Every swimmer can get into these basic positions and create as much propulsion as possible for their frame. Let's check it out. So if we watch freestyle here, what we'll see is hand is deeper than the elbow is out wider, and that position is going to be maintained throughout most of the stroke. Same thing here. The elbow is wide, the hand is deep, and again, that's going to create a pretty effective position for swimmers to move water backwards with. So in this position, she's going to be strong, and she's going to have that whole forearm facing backwards, and she can pull the arm into the body and still maintain those positions. And so again, hand is deeper than the elbow is out wide, and those are the key principles. And so different swimmers may have the hand a little bit deeper. There may be a little bit more or a little bit less elbow bend, but the same idea is going to be there in all effective pulling. And two, what you may see is that arm stay a little bit wider with some swimmers. It may stay a little bit more under the body with some swimmers. Regardless, good positions are going to be created when the hand is deeper than the elbow and the elbow is wider than the hand. Now in butterfly, we're going to see the same thing. The hands are going to be deeper than the elbows are going to be out wide, and that simultaneously creates a big surface area, and it puts the arm in a position where the strongest muscles of the body can move the arm backwards there, and as she maintains that position throughout the pull as well. So holding that position, hands stay deep, elbows stay wide until the last second when the hands need to exit the water. So in, and then the hands get deep, the elbows get wide, and then the whole unit moves back. So take a look at it from the front here as well. You can see hands are deep, elbows are wide, and then everything moves back. Again, hands are deep, elbows are wide, and everything moves back. And so a different swimmer may have the hands a little bit deeper, may have the hands a little bit shallower, may have the elbows a little bit narrower, but regardless, it's going to be the same basic concept based upon the swimmer's limb length, based upon their strength, and then based upon the range of motion they have throughout the upper body. So again, the setup of the stroke is getting the hand deep and the elbow out, and then the pull is going to happen moving straight back, maintaining those positions. And since it's a principle, it applies to breaststroke as well. So the hands are deep, the elbows are wide, and then the pull happens. So same concept, hands deep, elbows wide, and then squeezing back. Just a little bit different because the setup of the stroke is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a little bit more outward motion in the front of the stroke. There's going to be a little bit more inward motion in the back of the stroke, but it's the same idea. The hands get deep, the elbows stay wide, and then the pull comes back. Again, set up the same way. It's the same way to create those positions because, again, it's about surface area and then being in a position where the strongest muscles can pull with, and getting the hands deep and the elbows wide is the way to make that happen. Different breaststroker might have the hands a little bit deeper, might not be quite as wide, might be a little bit more narrow, could be a lot of different things, but the principle is going to be the same regardless of the swimmer. Get the hands deep, get the elbows wide, and then pull from that position. Now, because swimmers are on the back, it's a little bit different. What we'll see here is that the elbow is always going to stay deep and the hand is always going to stay wide. And so that's what you'll see with every backstroker swimming well, but it's going to be a little bit different from swimmer to swimmer. The swimmer on the right here has a little bit shallower pull. Her hand is a little bit wider out to the side. The elbow is not as deep. And then especially the swimmer on the far left, they have a much deeper pull. The elbow is getting down a lot deeper. You can see it right there. And she's going to pull a little bit narrower. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a little bit different. And that somewhere in between is somewhere in between with those positions as well. But in every case, the elbow is deep. The hand is higher than the elbow, and the hand is out wide to the side. And that happens for the same reasons. It puts the arm in a position where the whole forearm, the whole hand is facing backwards in all of these swimmers. And from that position, swimmers can squeeze back, pull straight back with the strongest muscles of the body and maintain that position of the surface area throughout the whole stroke. So it's ultimately simple, the position swimmers need to be in. With backstroke, it's about getting the elbow deep rather than the hand deep and the hand wide rather than the elbow wide. So it's more or less the opposite of freestyle. And that's because swimmers are flipped on their back versus their stomach, and they're dealing with the same structure of the arm. So things are flipped, but it's the same principles as when they're on their stomach. Get in a position where you can create a lot of surface area and then be in a position where you can create a lot of force. And so we get that same idea. So it's all about hand position and elbow position, and that is the most important thing for setting up the stroke effectively and then maintaining those effective positions throughout the pull. And what it's all about is finding the most effective position for each swimmer that allows them to take advantage of their structure, their strengths, and that will allow them to create as much propulsion as possible. When swimmers pull, do the hands move back or does the body move forward? Yes. Let's find out why. There's a notion that when swimmers pull, the hand actually stays in the same place and swimmers move their body past their hand. And in most cases, that's presented as a goal, and it's something that elite swimmers are seen as doing, whereas less skilled swimmers are not nearly as effective as that, and as a result, do not swim as fast. So the question is that even possible, and is that what swimmers should be trying to do? As with most things, there's nuance here. Do the hands move backward during the propulsive portion of the pull? Yes, I think they do. Does the body move forward at the same time as the hand moves backwards during that propulsive portion? Yes, I think they do. And so when swimmers create propulsion, they are moving their arms backwards, and that allows them to move their body forwards. Both things can be true at the same time, and instead of an either or, it becomes a matter of degree. So really unskilled swimmers, yeah, they're probably going to move their arm back in a large range of motion and have very little forward body motion. Whereas an elite swimmer, a really skilled swimmer, is probably able to get more forward motion from the same backward motion of their arm. So again, it's not so much an either or, it's more a matter of degree. A second important point is that it's often said, particularly in freestyle, that the hand exits the water in front of where the hand entered the water. However, as we'll see in a moment, that can still be true even if the hand moves backwards during the main propulsive part of the stroke. And so again, both things can simultaneously be true. It can be true that the hand moves backwards during the propulsive part of the pull, and it can be true that the hand actually exits in front of where it enters. Let's check it out. So watch this swimmer here because this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. So if the hand enters right here, what you'll watch is it enters and then it moves forwards before he starts his pull. Now, if we try to get a landmark here, he's entered the water right about that transition in color on the lane lines. And so again, he's moved forwards. Now, before he's even started his pull, look how much further he is ahead of that buoy. This is contributing to the fact that his hand is going to exit in front of the hand, but we haven't even looked at the actual pull yet. And if we watch the actual pull, the hand's going to move backwards, more so than the body moves forwards. But because of that gliding in the front of the stroke, because he takes time to set it up, because he enters the hand and then it moves forward, that can allow the hand to exit in front of where he entered. But during the pull itself here, the hand can still move back faster than the body move forward. If you watch here, the speed of the hand is greater than the speed of the body. And so again, that observation that the hand exits in front of where the hand enters doesn't necessarily mean that the hand can't move backwards during the pull, even in a really effective swimmer. Another important observation is that during the main propulsive part of the pull, the hand speed can be almost twice what the body speed is. So the hand is moving backwards twice as fast as the body is moving forwards, and the only way that's possible is if the hand is moving backwards relative to what the arm is doing. So again, the arm can still be moving backwards and the swimmer can still be moving forwards at the same time. Both things can coexist. And what matters is how much and to the degree both happen. And so if we saw this pull here and this swimmer was really unskilled, what we'd see is the hand shoots right back and there's no forward motion of the body. But obviously, if we watch this swimmer here, you can see he moves forwards as he does that because he's skilled. But it's not total forward motion. There's still some backward motion of the hand. How much that is, that's going to be dependent on the swimmer. And so the same thing is going to happen, although to a lesser extent during sprint freestyle. So his hand enters, he's still moving forwards and he's just getting into the pull, but he already moved forwards a little bit before he actually started the pull. And then when he pulls here, there's going to be more hand speed than there is body speed. And so his hand is going to move backwards relative to the body, and the body is going to move forwards in space in both cases, but the hand is going to move backwards faster than the body is going to move forward. And in terms of communicating with swimmers, it's okay. It's probably even productive to communicate that swimmers want to be moving the body past the hand rather than just moving the hand backwards. However, it's also important to understand what's actually happening because when our strategy for improving these skills doesn't work, we have to be able to look back at what's reality in order to create a solution that's going to help swimmers go faster. So again, the body is going to move forwards during the pull. However, the hand itself is also going to move backwards in the water as the swimmer pulls. So we'll see the same basic things here in backstroke. He enters the water, and then when he actually pulls, you see the acceleration of the hand, and that's going to be moving faster than the body, which means the hand is going to be moving backwards in space. The body's going to move forwards as well, but the hand is going to move back faster than the body moves forward. And again, the degree to which this happens is going to be dependent on the skill of the swimmer. And so the more water swimmers can move backwards with each pull, the more the body is going to move forwards and the less the arm is going to move backwards. So again, there is a skill to it. It's just not an absolute thing. If we watch here, he's just set up his stroke. Now pay attention to the buoys here. You can see that the hands move backwards relative to the buoy and the body moves forwards relative to the buoy. And so both things can happen at the same time. The hand can move backwards in the water, and that can still allow the body to move forwards. Again, it's just a matter of degree, and better swimmers are going to be able to better manage these relationships more effectively. If we watch this swimmer, what we're going to see, his hand is right at where that color change is from lighter blue to darker blue. And then as he finishes the pull, right there, he's going to be about halfway in between that color change. And so his hand is clearly moved backwards in the water. But as you saw too, his body did move forwards as well. Because when he started to pull, his head was about a third of the way up the color change. And then when he finishes the pull, he's well into the second color change. And so within a single stroke, the body can move forwards, the body can move past the hand. However, the hand is also going to be moving backwards. And again, just like in freestyle, whether it's distance freestyle or sprint freestyle, the degree to which that happens will depend upon the skill of the swimmer. Some swimmers are going to pull back and not move forwards, and some swimmers are going to pull back and move a lot forwards. The hand does move backwards, the body does move forward, and then both can happen at the same time. Having just discussed the degree to which the hands move backwards during the pull, to what extent do they move side to side? To learn more, check out the video below.